As the Chair and are unavoidably absent, I now invite nominations for a temporary chair.
I propose Deputy Buckley.
Is that agreed?
Agreed.
I now call on Deputy Buckley to take the chair.
As we have a quorum, are we in public session yet? No?
Yes.
We are, going because we need to suspend the committee meeting just temporarily so we can bring in our witnesses. So the committee is suspended.
Agreed.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to this public meeting today. We have apologies received from Deputies Martin Brown and Deputy Cormac Devlin, and I don't see any other apologies here. The first question I have today is that we approve the minutes of the private and public meeting on the 3rd and 4th of May 2023. These have already been approved at a virtual private meeting, but we must do this for procedural reasons. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Now, before we go, I'd like to read out some formal notices. I would like to remind the members of the constitutional requirements that members must be physically present within the confines of the place which Parliament has chosen to sit, namely Leinster House, in order to participate in public meetings. I will not permit a member to participate where they are not adhering to the constitutional requirement. Therefore, any member who attempts to participate from outside the precincts will be asked to leave the meeting. Now, our next business is our engagement with Garda Ombudsman Commissioner to discuss the annual report 2021 and related matters. And before we start, I wish to explain some limitations to parliamentary privilege and the practice of the House as regards reference you may make to other persons in your evidence. The evidence of witnesses physically present or who give evidence from within the parliamentary precincts is protected, pursuant to both the Constitution and the Statute, by absolute privilege. You are again reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice that you should not criticise or make charges against any person or entity by name or in such way as to make him, her, or it identifiable or otherwise engage in speech that might be regarded as damaging to the good name of the person or entity. Therefore, if your statements are potentially defamatory in relation to any identifiable person or entity, you will be directed to discontinue your remarks. It is imperative that you comply with any such direction. So before we hear from the witnesses, I propose that we publish the opening statements on the committee's website. Is that agreed? Okay. So on behalf of the committee, I would like to extend a warm welcome to Justice Roy McCabe, Chairperson, Commissioner Hugh Hume, and Mr. Peter Whelan, Director of Investigations and Operations. Also in attendance is Ms. Valerie Woods, Deputy Director of Administration for GSOC. Justice Rory McCabe will read out the opening statement. I suggest that Justice Rory McCabe should make his opening statement for around 10 minutes. We will then have questions and comments from members. Each member will have around 10 minutes. Members may speak more than once. And I would now like to invite Justice Rory McCabe to make his opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And while we submitted this a couple of days ago, and I'm sure you've had an opportunity to look at it, I think it would be helpful to put it on the record from the point of view of people who will be watching. And thank you for inviting us here today. We had a very fruitful engagement last year. I'm joined, as you said, by my fellow Commissioner, Hugh Hume. Alongside him is Peter Whelan, our Director of Operations, and Valerie Woods, who is our Deputy Director of Administration. We're appearing before you today having just recently submitted our 2022 report to the Minister, and it's my understanding that it will shortly be laid before the Houses. So while the formal focus of today's meeting is our 21 report, which we published last summer, we've also included some detail from our 2022 report in the supplementary briefing material that we sent to you. We thought it would be a good idea to relate some of this fresher information to you, not least because, as you'll be more than aware, this time next year, GSOC will no longer exist. Indeed, it's in the context of the significant institutional reforms facing GSOC that we meet you today. Since our last meeting, the Policing, Security and Community Safety Bill was published and has recently completed committee stage In the Dáil, we expect the bill to be enacted in the coming months, and its core provisions, including the replacement of GSOC with the new Office of the Police Ombudsman, are expected to be commenced early in 2024. Now, it's a major change of policing oversight, and this Commission and our executive team have been given a specific objective of transitioning GSOC to the new Office of the Police Ombudsman. So we look forward today to speaking to you about this task, which is well underway at present. GSOC was established in 2007 under the Garda Síochána Act 2005. Our primary job is to independently investigate complaints from the public concerning the conduct of members of An Garda Síochána. Now, we also conduct investigations into matters referred to us by An Garda Síochána, by the Minister for Justice, by the Policing Authority, as well as matters that we ourselves judge to be in the public interest to investigate. In addition, we're one of the designated bodies to which members of An Garda Síochána can make protected disclosures. We have our headquarters in Dublin, and we have regional offices in Cork and in Longford. We operate 26 counties, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. The work is challenging and complex, and results depend on our staff, whose skill and dedication deserve the highest respect and recognition. Now, we receive a significant volume of complaints from members of the public, usually in the region of around 2,000 per annum. In 2022, for example, we received a total of 1,826 complaints containing 2,234 separate allegations. Complaints range from low-level issues to matters of the utmost seriousness. In 2022, for example, the top 3 circumstances underpinning complaints were matters arising during arrest, poor customer service, or complaints relating to the conduct of an investigation. The top 3 allegations arising from complaints in 22 were neglect of duty, which amounted to 33%, non-fatal offences, such as assault, 21%, and abuse of authority, 20%. Admissibility rates for complaints range between 50 and 60%. Many complaints and allegations, while made in good faith, arise from circumstances that come hand in hand with Gardaí carrying out their duty. Others clearly relate to circumstances where members have breached their own professional standards or the law. It's our job to sort through these and to contribute to a more accountable policing infrastructure in Ireland. Where we identify systematic issues in our investigative work, we make recommendations to An Garda Síochána to advise them as to the need to review policing policy and practice. We've recently decided to publish these in full on a periodic basis, including any relevant responses from An Garda Síochána. Since 2018, we've also operated a local intervention initiative. This can facilitate the speedy resolution of some complaints without the need for a formal investigation. And this innovation has been extremely successful over the past few years and has considerable value in allocation of scarce resources where they're most needed. Now, it's also important to be clear where our role ends. We don't prosecute Gardaí, we don't suspend or discipline them. If our investigations lead us to conclude that an offence may have been committed, we are obliged to send a file to the DPP. It is then for the DPP, as the state's independent prosecuting authority, to decide whether a prosecution is warranted. If our conclusion is that misconduct has occurred, we pass the file to the Garda Commissioner, whose responsibility it is to consider whether a disciplinary sanction should apply. Now, by their very nature, some investigations are straightforward and some are not. Some can be dealt with quickly, some require a more significant commitment in terms of staff, resources and time. The duration of investigations can cause frustration. That's understandable. However, we, as with all investigative agencies, are duty-bound by the principle of due process, the need to respect human rights principles, and we cannot and will not prioritise speed at the expense of rigour in completing our investigations. GSOC has no interest in keeping any investigation open any longer than is strictly necessary. Now, last year, I said that organisational transition was the Commission's primary strategic focus in the context of the drafting and eventual publication and passage of the bill. That's currently making its way through the Oireachtas. The Commission and our colleagues across GSOC's executive staff have worked with the Department of Justice on the bill, in the course of which we gave reasoned observations on gaps in and many practical issues of concern that we identified in the draft legislation. The bill represents a significant step forward in addressing a clearly defined and long-signalled gap in Ireland's policing accountability infrastructure. That being said, It's our view that in a number of significant ways the legislation falls short of the vision of independent civilian oversight that was laid out by the Commission on the Future of Policing in 2018. The bill maintains what, in our view, is an undue degree of ministerial involvement in the governance and operations of the new police ombudsman. The bill curtails the new agency's powers in crucial areas, including search powers, and fails to require Garda Síochána to cooperate fully and promptly with the agency's investigations. Now, as the bill continues its passage through the Oireachtas in the coming weeks and months, we will continue to articulate these concerns. In parallel to our engagement on the draft legislation, GSOC is involved in cross-agency and cross-departmental implementation programmes. These aim to put all the practical governance, process and interagency systems in place to ensure that the new Office of the Police Ombudsman will be ready to fulfil its new statutory remit. This involves sustained engagement by GSOC, administrative and operational staff, with counterparts in the Department of Justice, on Garda Síochána and the National Shared Services Office. This work is ongoing. A core aspect of it has been to prepare our institutional and governance structure for our relaunch as an agency with, for the first time, its own independent Oireachtas vote, a Chief Executive Officer who will be the accounting officer, answerable directly to these houses instead of the Secretary General of the Department of Justice, who's the current accounting officer, and an Ombudsman and Deputy Ombudsman replacing the present three-person commission. Work on a new and multifunctional case management system, fundamental to the ability of the new Office of the Police Ombudsman to fulfil its enhanced mandate, is also a priority, and a priority in our organisational transition. It's a complex project for which we're drawing on a well of external expertise and guidance. Once complete, it will equip the new Office of the Police Ombudsman to enhance performance management, track the progress and timeliness of investigations, and crucially, to produce robust data on trends and patterns on which we can base research. Following some welcome increases in our staffing and resourcing in recent years, our current staff complement is today about 170. Our most recent budget allocation in 2023 was €16.67 million. Unfortunately, this remains some way off the minimum necessary to meet our present needs and doesn't come close to meeting the requirements that the expanded statutory functions proposed in the new legislation will require. GSOC has repeatedly and publicly flagged that for the new Office of the Police Ombudsman to succeed, significant additional support in the shape of resources and expertise will be needed. In order to better identify the new Ombudsman's needs, we commissioned an external organisational review of GSOC. This has just been completed, will assist us in the Department of Justice in making a business case to the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. It will also provide us with a prism through which we can view existing strengths and weaknesses in our present operation. It is, in the last couple of days, being placed on our website. The review demonstrates what a transformed and expanded Office of the Police Ombudsman will require in terms of staffing, resourcing and expertise. Our aim is to paint a clear picture of what will be necessary to ensure that our successors, the new Police Ombudsman, the Deputy Police Ombudsman and Chief Executive Officer, can fulfil their new remit. In broad terms, a minimum of doubling of our current staff complement, including a considerable increase in our complement of investigative staff, will be required. Now, we're not talking about a Rolls-Royce, but a vehicle that can carry all the complement needed to investigate all the complaints that we receive from start to finish professionally, fairly, rigorously, and in a timely fashion. Recruiting, training and embedding such a large number of staff will also be a significant challenge for the new organisation. To that extent, I welcome the consideration that Garda Síochána are giving to facilitate our investigators in their training system. And it's a training system that is sophisticated, comprehensive, fully state-funded and situated in Templemore. Whether the new Office of the Police Ombudsman will succeed will depend on the combination of many different ingredients. The core of these, in the shape of a motivated, competent and dedicated staff, is already present. More responsibilities will, however, require more resources. Effective investigation in this digital age has become a fast-moving and increasingly complex undertaking. Failure to prepare for this will inevitably be preparation for failure. Keeping ahead of this is the aim, but keeping pace alone will take a considerable effort. Recognising these immutable facts when it comes to resourcing will determine if the aims and objectives of this new legislation regime will be met. So in conclusion, it's our clear aim as a Commission and executive staff to do everything we can to ensure that the new Office of the Police Ombudsman is equipped to provide the service that the public expects. Efficient, effective, human rights-based policing oversight that promotes accountability and the enhancement of trust in policing in Ireland. I'll conclude my open remarks there and look forward to the discussion to come. I invited you last year to consider coming to visit us at our Dublin headquarters, take the opportunity to meet our staff, and I repeat that invitation today. Meet the staff, listen to them, see the work they do. It's my belief that you'll be impressed. And thank you again for affording us the opportunity to discuss our work with you today.
Justice McCabe. Before I throw it out to the floor, it's a fairly in-depth report, and as I said to you previously, what I liked about it was no holds barred. But even going back to the last time you were here, you were talking about the staffing levels all the time, and you said at that time that you were hoping to recruit somewhere around 30 additional places. But you also said that you wanted at least double your complement with a large increase in investigative staff. You also mentioned about the budget, that it's not enough basically, even though it's 22% above what it was allocated. But I was thinking while you were talking, I mean, you can't bake a currant cake without currants. If you don't have the full complement, it doesn't work. So I'd like to see, where would you be on, a realistic figure or a ballpark figure on what actually it does to fully staff this, have a full complement. And there was two other ones in it. It was one I suppose one of my passions is protected disclosures and how it's changed now and where the onus is now, I suppose the reversal of proof of burden. But it says here, what is the actual process for a member of An Garda Síochána making a protected disclosure? And would you be able to give us any idea of how many was actually made? And finally, before I let the others in, you stated also that in the duration of your some of the investigations can cause frustration. Would that frustration be to you or to the complainants?
Well, I think I can probably answer that in one sentence. I think everybody involved is frustrated.
Is it?
The complainants can be frustrated.
Yeah.
The members who are the subject matter of the investigation can be frustrated, and we can be frustrated, seeking timely cooperation from people involved in the investigation. So it's a general frustration, and I'm sure members of the public are frustrated when they regularly turn on the radio or look at the TV and hear complaints from people, often justified, about the delays that are there. But in respect of the other, I'm going to ask Commissioner Hume first to come in, and perhaps then my Director of Operations and Deputy Director of Administration to deal with the staffing issues and the protected disclosure matters.
If I may, I'll start with the protected disclosure matter, Chair, if that's okay. Prior to the new legislation coming in, GSOC was a nominated body, and the commissioners were prescribed persons under the legislation for workers within An Garda Síochána. So workers within An Garda Síochána could come to us and make protective disclosures. Now that hasn't largely changed with the new legislation, so that is largely, in practical terms, the same. We receive, on average, about 20 protective disclosures a year. Last year we received 18, but it can vary over the years. We currently, at the 1st of January of this year, we had 53 ongoing investigations arising from protected disclosures. And they range from a broad range of matters, from allegations of corruption, of sexual impropriety, low-level theft, or just potentially bad behaviour within the workplace. We have a dedicated protected disclosure unit who manage all, on our behalf, all receipts of protected disclosure, protecting at all costs the identity of the person making that protected disclosure, and carrying out investigations to a very high standard, but also in a way that ensures the integrity of the process. As I said, that has largely unchanged by the new Act, whereas before the Minister could send us a protected disclosure, the Minister of Justice. Now, obviously, that is routed through the new Protective Disclosure Commissioner rather than the Minister, but a very resilient and active end of our business that produces a lot of investigations, and the work we'll be working on. So if there's anything arising from that, Chair. And then in terms of the staff, and I will hand over to Peter, we are still some way off our complement. Mr McCabe referenced the Grant Thornton Review. The Grant Thornton Review conducted international benchmarking of similar agencies to ourselves and looked at the comparable caseload and work that's carried by organisations. So our equivalent in England and Wales carries between 2 and 5 cases per investigator. We are a long way off that level of demand placed on our investigators. I'll let Peter talk in detail about it, but we are significantly above that level, and we are, based on the figures produced by the Grant Thornton report and our own internal assessment, as of today, we are significantly under-resourced to benchmark against international practice. Peter, I'll let you maybe.
Yeah, I'm just following on from what Hugh said. The Grant Thornton review did a very comprehensive benchmarking exercise, and they did actually provide us a model then on which we could base our figures, which was really helpful. At any one time in GSOC, we might have between 900 and 1,200 investigations ongoing at different stages of the investigative process. At the moment, we've 30 investigators and 10 assistant investigators, so that's 40. If we've a minimum of 900 investigations and we want 10 people to, each person to carry 10 cases, we're talking about figures maybe of 90, so it leaves the figure of 40 a long way short of where we need to be. And then that adds to, obviously, the stress and pressure, as Judge McCabe spoke about, for everyone really, the internal staff who are not able to do very timely investigations, but do very comprehensive and very thorough investigations, respect processes, respect all of the legal procedures that need to be put in place. So the investigations, although lengthy, we're finding are becoming more complex in nature, and the volume is just extremely high.
Thank you on that. I'm just going to open up to the floor to Senator Warfield.
Just maybe on that, so I saw that the Garda Representative Association General Secretary has previously stated that his understanding was that each GSOC investigator has 50 to 60 files. Is that accurate? Sorry, just to follow up on the last point, and I think the international situation might be more like 15 cases per investigator being the norm. I just wonder, is that an accurate representation of the current numbers?
40 to 50 was a reality, I think, about 2 years ago. The case numbers now would be more around the 25 to 30 figure. And again, one case might be a very like we've 2 investigating officers who are dealing solely with major investigations. So like you have to take figures like that out and people like that out. So yeah, they're still way in excess of the 10 that has been recommended by Grant Thornton.
Looking at the documents submitted today, there's a marked decrease in the number of referrals made to GSOC in 2022. I think it's around a 30% decrease in referrals over the 12 months. And I just wondered maybe why, I'd welcome your thoughts on why the number of referrals are down, quite a significant amount. And I wonder if you have any indication about what has driven that decline.
So if I'm right then, you're referring to in 2021 there was 55 referrals, and in 2022 we're showing 41 referrals. I think it might be useful just to unpick what a referral means, Senator, if that's okay. So when we talk about referrals, we're talking about referrals under Section 102 of the Act, as we talk about, which is where death or serious harm has occurred. Now, these are some of the most tragic and challenging investigations that GSOC are called to encounter. Lives have been changed forever. Loved ones have been taken from people. So they come to us when the Garda Commissioner, which in practice means a superintendent, makes a decision that the death or serious harm of an individual may be as a result of the conduct of a member of the Garda Síochána. So that's where referrals come about. So they follow a death in custody, or a suicide following custody, or any situation where the superintendent says the actions of a guard may have led to that. So that's the first way it comes into us. I think there is nothing that we can see, looking at the types and causes, to indicate there's any systemic or organisational or environmental factors that have caused this change over this 2 years. Last year was a particularly was a very busy year. It felt like a very busy year, but certainly we can't see any underlying factors around that at this time.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you for that. I wondered, maybe just in terms of the bill, the Policing, Security and Community Safety Bill, can you expand on the issues around potential amendments, and just maybe the issues that Mr. McCabe touched on, including search powers and ministerial oversight?
Well, I think there's pros and cons to the bill that we've been very clear and open and honest about. We welcome the increased independence that the bill provides to the new office. We'll have our own vote and access to your own money. Actually, money is a real determinant of independence and allows us to make important decisions. So that's really positive. The new bill requires automatic referral of all complaints to the new office, whereas at the moment there can be, they don't automatically all come to us. They can be processed within the Garda Síochána, and there can be decisions made that it doesn't come to us. So that automatic referral to us is a really important point, firstly, so that we can understand the level of potential wrongdoing that's ongoing in Garda Síochána, and if there's any policy or procedures that need to change. But also means that there's true independence around investigations. So they're really important aspects of the new bill. On the other side, we do have some concerns around the independence. So I should have said as well, we also welcome the streamlining. The new bill allows for complete streamlining of complaints. At the moment, if a complaint comes in, we have to deal with it as a criminal investigation. When we finish that, we have to start again and deal with it as a discipline investigation, and that adds to the timeliness. So the new bill allows us to just deal with it as a single issue. On the negatives table, we have some concerns about the independence. You're quite right. The new bill places a triple lock on searches of Garda stations, and some of that we advocate for. So we believe there should be judicial oversight of our searches of Garda stations, and we've advocated for that, and that's good. It also requires the head of OPO to authorise the search, and that's appropriate to the senior person within the new body makes that determination. Where we do have some challenge is that the current bill requires that the Garda Commissioner give concurrence to the search of Garda stations. And we feel that that is a hindrance to our investigative independence. Now, in practice, but a lot of times we will inform members of the Garda Síochána so that they can facilitate that search. But that is an operational decision to be made by the investigators, and shouldn't be subject to Garda permission to search Garda stations. So we think that's a challenge around the independence. The other issue of independence that we are concerned about is the requirement that we submit our report via the Minister for Justice, and that it's laid with the Minister's approval. We would look closer to what the Defence Ombudsman does and others, and ask that we lay the report directly direct us ourselves to demonstrate that independence. And that's one of the areas that we have concerns about. We have concerns about timeliness, in that the bill places a requirement on the new body to act timely, and that's fine. We accept that, but it places no equivalent requirement on Garda Síochána to respond and to support our investigation in a timely manner. So we could be held to account for delays from Garda Síochána, and I think we feel that's unfair and can reflect on us. And the biggest issue, which actually will affect timeliness and independence, and it's a bit of a stuck record, is resources.
Yeah.
This new bill is going to place potentially a significant addition, 1,400 potentially additional investigations with us, significant additional processes with us, so we need to be resourced to deliver that. We need to be resourced to deliver those additional investigations, which will also bring additional complexity because some of them will come from within An Garda Síochána if there are incidents of concerns. So we need to be effectively resourced so that our independence has not been hindered by lack of resource and our timeliness has not been hindered by lack of resource. So there's the pros and cons of the bill as we see it at the moment, Sandra.
Just, I'm probably way over time, but just to clarify that under that bill, a search of a Garda station by GSOC will be subject to approval by the Garda Commissioner.
It's a triple lock. The Ombudsman has to approve it, a judicial oversight has to approve it, and the Garda Commissioner has to approve it. So that's correct. And that's that last piece that we have concerns about.
And then your annual report is only laid before the House of the Oireachtas with the approval of the Minister.
Correct.
Yeah, Gurmagad.
If you want after.
Thank you.
I know call on Senator Lombard.
Chair, welcome to witnesses. Thank you for a very in-depth contribution. Could I get an indication, if I could, regarding how many files you actually have at the moment that are open? And could I get a timeline regarding the actual opening and the closing of these files? In other words, do we have files that are open 2, 3, 4 years? Can you give me an indication of where the actual file profile is with your organisation at the moment? Thank you, Justice.
We have files open up to 15 years. The majority of our files are open up to 3 years. We've 350 files. In just a point in time survey done last March, we had 350 files in year 1. I think it's 168 in year 2 and around 80 in year 3. So then it gets, the numbers get a whole lot less, but there are still files that would be open because maybe you were waiting of a board of inquiry for the guards to implement, or we're waiting for a coroner's inquest to finalise. We're waiting for a court case to finalise. So, yeah, we do have, or we haven't resources to progress certain cases in timely fashions, but there's normally a reason behind them going beyond 3 years. The average length of time, the median length of time for an investigation, for a criminal investigation, is 366 days. Look, they can take a lot longer than that, depending on the case, or they can be shorter because they're so very different. Every case brings a whole different set of requirements in relation to how we investigate. And there's a whole lot of other factors then. Sometimes we get really good engagement from the complainant, sometimes we don't. We depend on really good engagement from the member, sometimes we don't get that. If the member appoints a solicitor, that can introduce delays. If there's a coroner's inquest, there can be delays. If the DPP has a file and we're waiting a decision, that can create delays. If there's court dates awaited, that can create delays. If we have to gather a large amount of evidence and maybe take a large amount of statements, that can create delays. We take statements under caution. And if we're gathering CCTV and digital forensic evidence, it can be quite timely to download that and to analyse that. So there's a whole really, and every investigation won't be subject to all of that, but some will, so it varies greatly.
Regarding the long-term cases that are over a certain period, is there a process in place in your organisation to deal with them? Is there a review mechanism? Is there a cold case mechanism? What is the mechanisms that you have to deal with a case that's over, let's say, a 3-year period?
We review every quarter. We take a look at that spreadsheet to find out why cases are continuing to be ongoing. If it's within our gift to finalise them, we do. But as I say, the ones that we have a group from 6 to 15 years, and there's a small number of cases, but they wouldn't be within our gift to close. We'd be waiting for another party.
Could we have a breakdown of the actual timelines of the cases? Is that information in your report? As in, like, the actual years?
Yeah, we have median timelines in the report, and I think there's a table there which compares it over a number of years.
Okay, thank you. Regarding your case workload that you've mentioned, it's quite significant, to say the very least. Is there a regional breakdown of, or a divisional breakdown of those case workloads?
We have a regional breakdown which would be approximately 50% from the Dublin office, around 22% from the Longford office and 25% from the Cork office.
Would they be broken down by your offices rather than the police districts itself? Would that
They
be
would.
fair?
We can break them down further by county, but we don't align exactly to the 19 Garda districts.
And in your assessment, is there a peak or a fall, or is there a direct line regarding Garda districts? In other words, is there...
Yeah, DMO district would be the largest in terms of caseload.
Regarding COVID and how COVID operated regarding your operations, in particular with the report that you brought forward, you might give me an indication of how COVID might have hampered or might have been an issue regarding putting together workload, but also the actual complaints going forward. Did you find in the COVID period there was a peak or trough? Where did COVID actually affect you regarding, number one, your ability to operate, but number two, the complaints coming through you?
In terms of our ability to operate, COVID affected us like it affected a large number of organisations, but we did not stop. And credit, I was only joined the office laterally at the end of COVID, but those who went before me had a very robust plan in place to continue to deliver the service from complaints, administration and to investigations. So we did continue to deliver our service throughout that period. But yes, there were delays with witnesses not wishing to come and be interviewed, with Garda members being concerned about interviews about our own staff, health and well-being. So yes, COVID affected us like it did other organisations. But there was considerable amount of work went on call remained, and staff continued to attend calls and to respond to referrals, even despite the COVID pandemic. Now, we did see some, we did for a while keep records of COVID-related complaints arising from Garda Síochána, but like much of the data and our current case management system, it wasn't hard data that we, because it's hard to establish if an individual member of the public complains about excessive force at a COVID checkpoint, if that's COVID related, or whether that was simply because of the Garda presence.
That's a very interesting point. Like, our interaction with the Garda community through that period of time was something that the state has never seen before. The data regarding people's right to move, people's ability to be stopped in the street to ask you where you're going. Did you see an increase in activity coming to you regarding those issues itself?
Well, we definitely did see an increase in complaints arising from checkpoints because of those increased Garda contact with members of the public. But our information probably wouldn't be mature enough to establish that was directly a result of COVID or directly as a result of the COVID regulations. But certainly there was more Garda contact with individual members of the public, and that did generate additional complaints.
And there was a spike in complaints around this COVID period, for lack of a better terminology?
Yeah, given the length that it happened, spike's probably the wrong word, but there certainly was an escalation over a long period of time of complaints. Year on year, we're up.
Yeah, in 2021 particularly. Yeah. We had 2,189 complaints in 2021, which translated into 1,232 admissible complaints. That dropped in 2022 to 1,826, 904 admissible complaints. So we did see quite a rise in 2021.
Okay. Regarding your actual ability to recruit, looking at 3.8% unemployment at the moment in the States since yesterday was announced, our lowest rate in the history of the state. You have a very unusual profile to be recruiting, to be very honest. I think we're looking at a certain cohort of individual that's required to fit the skill set to actually do this operation itself. Could you give the committee an indication of who or what is the personnel that you're chasing? You mentioned investigators. Those investigators, would they have been involved in other police organisations, either in the state or maybe outside the state? You might give me an indication of what you're actually looking for when you're looking to recruit the numbers that are being proposed, and the challenges, whether budgetary or even personnel, required to actually reach that target.
Yeah, I think we're looking at a very large-scale recruitment exercise, and I think you're right. We're fishing in a very small pool. The profile we have at the moment of investigating officers would be former Defence Force, military police, former people from regulatory authorities, former international police services, and some former Gardaí. So that's the type of pool, but it's anyone with investigative experience, because we are a civilian oversight body, so we're looking for civilians who have any experience in doing investigations. Under the investigating officers, we have then the assisting investigating officers, who we do then over time bring them to the level of an investigating officer, and then they have the opportunity, if they want, to progress into that grade. So they would have less experience coming in, but they would be upskilled while on the job. So I think it's going to be a very difficult recruitment exercise, but there are some people out there. We have a panel at the moment of investigating officers, and we use the PAS to do all of our recruitment. And the clearance, vetting and clearance takes quite a while to get someone from interview stage into the organisation.
I was going to make 2 more points. One, and Mr. McKay mentioned it in his coverage, we are a people come and leave. We are, they acquire skills in GSOC that are invaluable to organisations, and they move on. So that turnover of staff, and particularly on the investigation side, but also in the wider civil service, is a constant drain for us. And Valerie might talk to this. Thankfully, we've recently secured sanction for a training course that will allow us to provide external training to members who maybe don't always have that investigative experience, to bring them up to a standard. Valerie, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. So, yeah, as you mentioned, we have received sanction recently to go to the market to develop to scope the development of a dedicated training course to onboard specialist skills for our investigative staff. You referenced the challenging market, and that is, it's an issue for, I suppose, every civil service organisation across the board, but there are particular issues related.
Like your work profile is slightly different.
It is, yeah. There are different challenges for us, I suppose, in terms of, Peter referenced the clearance process, the length of time that takes, the size of the pool that we have access to. Those kind of issues are they're ongoing for us all the time. But certainly the strength of the labour market right now is also another factor that frustrates our efforts to recruit.
So we anticipate this as an argument that we're going to hear from the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform when we come along and ask them for 100 new investigators and say, well, okay, if we give you permission, where are you going to get them? And that is a problem. There's no doubt about that, because there is no course. The only course that's available for investigations at the moment is basically the course that's run for trainee Gardaí in Templemore. And there has been a reluctance, I suppose, to get us involved in that. But I see a change at the moment, and I would have some hope that.
Where do you see the potential for us to get graduates into the system? Do you think we need to be talking to higher education about something along those lines?
Yes.
Like in many ways, with the deepest respect to our members of Garda Síochána, they could even benefit from such a course that would have graduates going through, which then could become a part of the Garda profile or part of another profile, whether a military police or yourselves. Do you think that should be an avenue that we should be discussing?
Yes, it's one of the matters that we've been discussing as to where we could actually, if you like, penetrate the education system to see if we could get Limerick or one of the higher educational institutes interested in putting on a dedicated course. And it's often, with education institutes, as you probably all aware, it's a matter of money, really.
I've only two more.
No, if you want to come back in a minute, I have to be fair with everybody. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much.
No bother. I now call on Senator Murphy.
Michaels, and I'd like to welcome you all here today. I think none of us underestimate the challenge of your job, and to be seen to try and be fair to everybody. I think this is going to be a really good exchange, because something we need to do as public representatives. So maybe for starters, and apologies if some of those questions have already been asked, but how many people make up the staff of GSOC, roughly? I mean, don't need exact figures.
We're in the region at the moment. Our current headcount is 157. We have a sanctioned headcount of 170.
And how many of those would be police officers?
There would be
what percentage?
percentage in the investigative side?
Investigating officers, we've 30 at the moment, and we've 10 assistant investigating officers.
And so, in general, how many police officers would be involved in GSOC? Would it be just that amount?
Well, no, we would have policing powers when we're doing criminal investigations, but none of them would be police officers as such. They'd be investigating designated officers under the Act.
And are they all from the Irish Police Force, or are they from different parts?
No, we have about 7, I think, at the moment from former guards, and the rest would be international police, defence forces, other regulatory authorities, non-regulatory authorities, people with investigation experience.
What countries would they come from?
Australia, UK, Northern Ireland, Ireland.
South Africa, Canada.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That's just to get up the makeup of the organisation.
And just sorry, Sam, just to confirm, they're not police officers anymore. They've retired. They've left.
They're former police.
They're former. So
they have been former police. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
We've no current serving police officers.
When a complaint is made, is the Garda that's under investigation informed of who made that complaint?
Well, that will depend, Senator. For example, in a protected disclosure, clearly they would not be informed who made the complaint, because that is the identity of the protected disclosure is protected at all costs. Okay. So they wouldn't receive that. If the person who's making the complaint is a witness to or is a victim of actions, then at some stage, yes, they clearly will be aware of the person. If the matter moves to investigation, not all complaints move to investigation, so they will be informed if there is an investigation at some stage. Now, we can hold back on providing some information if we're at a stage of gathering information and we don't want any information to be lost or any evidence to be lost. So when we hold back on telling people certain facts. But by and large, when we're in a criminal investigation that's outside the protective disclosures or discipline investigation, they will be aware at some stage the person who's made a complaint against them, in line with the Constitution and fair process.
Thank you, and I understand that. Thank you for the answer. Are the Garda informed of the nature of the complaint? Are they always informed of the nature of the complaint?
Absolutely. There's a requirement for us when they are served with papers of notification that will contain details of the nature of the complaint, unless, as again, like I said, we are withholding that for operational reasons to secure further evidence.
Okay. So how many Gardaí would be under suspensions through GSOC at the moment? Roughly, have you that figure?
None, because we don't suspend.
Well, how many of them are not turning up to their jobs because they're under investigation? Can I put it that way?
The guards would suspend, and there was a figure a while back of 14 suspensions that the guards have suspended where they've viewed some evidence where we have on file, but that would be purely a decision for the guards, not for ourselves.
Yes, so that's 14, you're saying?
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's the current figure, but there was a figure of 14. We depend on that figure from the guards.
Yeah, I understand
just for clarity purposes, we don't suspend anybody. It's for the Garda Commissioner to do that.
I understand that. Yeah. But I mean, when you're under GSOC complaint, they're obviously, most of them are actually suspended. It's not you to do it.
That may be so, but it could be as a result of an investigation that's been carried out by the Garda Commissioner himself.
Fair enough. I think it was in response to Senator Lombard. I think you may have said, Mr. Hume, that some of those cases could be going on for 15 years. Am I correct?
We certainly, Peter said that, but yes, we have cases. We have some cases in the organisation that are open. Now, again, the definition of open has a broad term, so it could be it's open because we're awaiting a coroner's inquest, or it does not necessarily mean it's under an open investigation. But there is cases that are currently open 15 years.
So that particular Garda would not be back at work as long as that particular case is still open. Is that correct?
No, that's not necessarily correct, because I'm not even sure in that case if it's suspended. We did meet with the guards to identify any long-term cases where guards were suspended and sought to clarify on ourselves, and we don't have any long-term cases where guards are suspended that we're aware of.
So how long roughly would people? I mean, 2 years, 3 years? Is there any case going to 5 or 6 years that a guard is still out of work because of being under inquiry, a GSOC inquiry? I understand there may be.
Well, We wouldn't be privy to that information. That's a matter for because the Commissioner manages all that. And GSOC may only be one factor in the determination of suspension. So we wouldn't be aware of all that information. That's a matter for the Commissioner, Garda Commissioner.
What type of misdemeanours or whatever would guards that are under suspension, like, I mean, obviously some things are quite serious, but would there be some other minor issues?
Again, we wouldn't be aware, Senator, because the Commissioner wouldn't necessarily tell us.
So you don't have any knowledge on that, even though you're investigating?
Yes, we're investigating, but the suspension and management of the Garda member is a matter for the Commissioner. And in fact, we don't necessarily want to confuse the two issues because our job is to investigate independently and fairly, and that's our function, not to suspend a member.
So you take a recent case, and thank you for being, upfront with your answers on that, in relation to, we wake up to the news one morning that a guard is going to be prosecuted over a very serious incident happened here where unfortunately 3 people were killed. And it appears to me that guard was in a line of duty doing his job, and it would appear that guard didn't know anything until that came out in the media. Is that true?
Well, I have to say we're not in a position to discuss open cases. That's a case that's now awaiting direction from the Director of Public Prosecutions. So it would be improper for us to comment on it at this stage.
But who would have been responsible
just
for...
through the chair, Senator. Just remember we have rules and regulations.
I understand that.
So I
no,
don't want you
I
to go
understand.
drift because you're going to identify somebody.
No, well, everybody's identifying it, to be honest. But can I just ask...
We're not the jury.
I understand that, Chairman, and I respect you. Can I just ask, how did the situation arise where we wake up to 7 a.m. news in the morning and top of it is that this guard is going to be prosecuted? Where does that come from? And the Garda, my understanding is that Garda, I'm just taking this case, that Garda or his family did not know.
Well, I hope you don't think I'm disrespectful of you in any way, but I'm really not prepared to discuss it at this stage. Because I'm precluded from doing so.
If it's helpful, we could outline the process of a referral.
Please do.
Yeah. Okay, so when a death or serious harm occurs and the Commissioner makes the decision that it may have resulted from conduct of a guard, he then refers it to GSOC. When it comes to us, it's a shall, we shall investigate. So we must then do an investigation. In all of those cases, because they're so serious, we would do a very comprehensive investigation. It's usually very long and very detailed. There's a lot of evidence to be gathered and assessed. When that's finished, then we would write up a report and send it to the Commission. The Commission within GSOC would then consider it, and if they thought that there was conduct that may constitute an offence, they would decide to send it to the DPP. The DPP would then consider the file and decide that it warrants a prosecution or it doesn't. At that stage, if they decide it does warrant a prosecution, it goes to a judge to issue the summons, and at that stage then it's into the court services for a court date. So that's the process. In amongst that, if it's a death, there may be a coroner's inquiry, and that's where some information will come out in the coroner's inquiry, but it won't be, nobody will have seen the evidence at this stage other than GSOC and the DPP. So anyone making commentary on that case, none of them will have, on any case, none of them will have viewed any evidence at that stage.
Okay. And I appreciate you clarifying that for me.
Senator, I'm just very conscious of time now because I want to get
Chairman,
back.
I'm on the Commission. I never take up time, so I have one or two more questions.
Just making the point.
No, it would be really wrong if you cut me short now. I have questions to ask.
I'm not cutting you short. I'm just reminding you that there'll be others
that's
coming
fine.
in, and I'm conscious of time.
That's fine. Okay.
In the second round.
Okay. Can I just ask?
Yeah, or you certainly can one more.
So, just in relation, I mean, I'm not talking about any specific case now, but would you agree in terms of how the public perceive all these things, that we need to improve the way the message goes out?
Undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly,
Thank
yes.
you. Thank you. Just
it gives me no pleasure to turn on the radio in the morning.
I admire your honesty,
Yeah.
because I can tell you, and I'm just, look, I understand you have a very difficult job to do. I'm sure you're all honourable people, and you want to see that fair play is given to everybody. But I can tell you, and as well to be honest here, the perception among the public is, once they hear on the news that GSOC are involved, the Garda, whether it's male or female, are guilty in their minds. That is the perception. And I'm sorry to say that, so we need to improve the message. One final question in this section. So if a member of the force feels they were treated unfairly or they have a concern that an investigation was not conducted, in a fair manner to them, have they any comeback? Is there any procedure which allows them to come back?
Well, it's called judicial review. They
That's
have
the
access
only
to
way.
the courts. They have access to the courts, and if the courts then have a duty to review the case and decide whether the GSOC acted within or outside its mandate, or in any event came up with a decision that was irrational. So then that is effectively judicial oversight of the oversight body.
Yeah. And I appreciate your answers.
Which is correct.
Yeah, I appreciate it, John. Thank you very much.
If I can just make some point just to Sanders' questions as well. Last year, we finalised 48 investigations arising from death or serious harm by a Garda member. So in 48 cases, we've completed our investigation. In 2 of those cases, we sent them filed to the DPP. So our response in sending to the DPP, where the legislation says we shall send a defence, is proportionate and only where the evidence says there may be offence. There's 2 cases out of 48 were sent to the DPP last year. So I think that provides some clarity around our decision making around that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator. Look, I'm very conscious of times, but I'm just going to open back up to the floor for maybe just one question each. So if Senator Waterfield, if you have a question, and then I go to Senator Lombard and Senator Murphy if you want to come in for one more after that. Thank you.
What time were we over at?
Not allowed leave. Fair enough. Yeah. Do you want to go first? I have to go to Ichikor. There's been much talk in recent weeks about the issue of body cameras and facial recognition technology. The ICCL and other human rights organisations note that such systems can often incorrectly identify faces, and particularly of women and people of colour. And that the ICCL have also stated that the use of such technology, in their opinion, is neither necessary nor proportionate. And I was just wondering, have GSOC any comment to make about whether the use of such technology would be good or bad or effective for GSOC to carry out your own work, and having consideration for those concerns? Would it be proportionate?
Chair, I think what we would say in relation to this, that it's a matter for their officers to decide if body-worn video and facial recognition software should exist in the state. From a GSOC point of view, the equipment may be useful. It's certainly, looking at our comparator in Northern Ireland, they published reports in relation to the use of body-worn video and how that allows them to assess complaints and allows them to make determination around what has happened at an incident. But no technology is infallible, and the technology can be used for both good and bad. From a GSOC point of view, any introduction of technology for us must have robust policies, robust procedures for the protection of data and protection of images to ensure that it's not shared disproportionately. And of course, it will mean that we a significant resourcing additional demand for GSOC, because as opposed to the 3,000 allegations we receive yearly now, each one of those potentially could have a body-worn video image attached to it that we would have to receive, manage, store, keep safe, review, and help. And that could be a huge additional resource intensive, both technical and human, for us going forward. It's a matter for the Oireachtas. It needs to be, whatever's brought in needs to be accompanied by proper, robust procedures that we can check and others can check to make sure that there's no misconduct going on there, and there will be implications for us. The wider issue for us is around culture and practice within the Garda Síochána rather than the technology, because any technology can be abused, and it's really important that it's treated with respect.
Thank you.
But if I may, Chairman, just to add, as from 15 years on the bench dealing with criminal trials largely, one of the most powerful tools that has really appeared has been real evidence in terms of CCTV coverage. The camera doesn't generally lie, and it's been a powerful weapon in protecting people as well, because it seems to me that the use of body-worn camera technology has a double effect. It can be used to detect and to assist in detecting crime, but it can also be used as protection for the member wearing the camera. And that's, I mean, I know the Commissioner is very keen on it, but as Hugh said, it is ultimately a matter for the Oireachtas.
Thank you. Now you've waited patiently enough, Senator Lombard.
Thank you, Deputy. Justice McCabe, could I ask you to clarify the terminology that you've in your opening statement regarding Oireachtas vote? What is the actual clarification or the definition of what you're proposing with the actual terminology that's written in your opening statement?
I suppose to give an example of it, I spent some time in a previous incarnation dealing with our colleagues in Northern Ireland during the peace talks. And one thing that was very frustrating as far as our colleagues in Northern Ireland are concerned was that in order to, they were all members of the EU at that stage, but they didn't have direct access. They had to go through Whitehall. And they always felt as if they were going with their begging bowl to Whitehall and let Whitehall process the application for funding to Europe. And they resented that. Now, our situation is, at the moment, we don't have our own vote. That means we have to apply to the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice passes on, applying whatever filter they think is appropriate to the DPER or the Department of Finance. Now, having your own vote means you've simply got direct access. You've control of your own vote.
Okay. And if I just want a supplementary in that, if I could.
The smallest ones, considering you're from Cork and you speak a lot faster, but this is your last one.
Stop. Your organisation potentially could become enlarged quite by a significant figure, which brings its own benefits, but also obviously more work. And you mentioned terminology, who regulates the regulator. A very significant statement. Like, what process would fall in place to actually make sure that the regulator is doing an appropriate job regarding its own staff or its own situation?
Well, we'd be there. We'd be still subject to the CNAG in the same way as our vote is, or our money is now subject to the CNAG via the Department of Justice vote. I mean,
but if I had to make a disclosure, who could you then make a disclosure on regarding the investigative powers of your officer? Let's say there was a protected disclosure required in a scenario, hypothetically, obviously. Who then would you or who would the potential person make a protected disclosure to?
Can I ask, do you mean a guard making a protected disclosure or a member of our staff making a protected disclosure?
Your staff.
I'll ask Valerie to address that.
That's only complete.
Valerie, explain that process.
Sure, yeah. So we do have thanks you. We do have an internal process for the investigation of protected disclosures by staff. At the moment, we haven't, this year and last year, we haven't received any, but there is a process for internal examination of those.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lombard. Thank you. I'm just going to call briefly on Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much. Can I just, through the chair again,
thank you,
say I really find this engagement very important. And to Valerie and you lads, I just, want to acknowledge your openness with us here today. I'm sorry, some of the questions were a little bit hairy, but maybe that's the nature of the beast, as they say. Just one question I did ask there earlier in relation to people who are suspended at the moment. I asked, is there some very minor issues that people are suspended on? What would be the most minor? If you can give me that information. And the other one is, was reverse back to what my colleagues have been saying in terms of what you need now in resources and staff. I mean, how many more staff do you really need now if you're to do your job properly? And thank you again for the engagement today.
Just to reiterate around the suspensions, the guards don't tell us all the rationale for suspending, so we don't know. While we carry out significant investigations into Gardas, the Garda themselves investigate matters that arise from within their own knowledge and ability, and they suspend based on information they have or complaints that they're dealing with that the complainants chose to not go with us but with them. So it would be impossible for us to know what cases are attract suspension level because that's an internal governance that we don't take any part in at all. In terms of the numbers, it probably hands over to Peter and Valerie on that.
Yeah, we were just saying earlier that Grant Thornton review gave us really a model to estimate numbers. they looked at the IOPC, our sister agency in the UK, in Northern Ireland and Scotland, and they said that each investigator might have 2 to 5 cases. They came up with a figure of 10 cases per investigator. At the moment, with our IOs and AIOs, investigating officers and assisting investigating officers, we'd have 40. So at any one time, we can cope with maybe 400 investigations. That's not taking into account of a whole lot of other factors, like a major investigation that comes in. We'd have between 900 and 1,200 cases at any one time on hand, so we'd need significantly more than the 40.
Thank you.
And just in case of suspensions, we do 2 types of investigation. One is a disciplinary investigation, the other is a criminal investigation. It's probably fair to say, although this isn't definite information, that our criminal investigations might attract more suspensions than the disciplinary investigations. But again, we wouldn't have full access to that information.
Thank you, Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Chair.
Before we close this meeting, I just want to invite any of the members, the witnesses here, just for if you want to make a closing remark.
We're very happy.
You're very happy. Well,
We're very happy the way we've been treated. Thank you very much indeed.
I wouldn't say so.
This is sanctuary.
Finally, I'd like to thank the Garda Ombudsman Commission, Justice Rory McCabe, Chairperson Commissioner Hume, Director of Investigations and Operations, Mr. Peter Whelan, and Deputy Director of Administration, Ms. Valerie Woods, for coming in here today to speak to us. This session was definitely very, very, very beneficial, and I do thank you for your honesty. So I will suspend the meeting for 5 minutes so the witnesses can leave the meeting. So the meeting is suspended.
Before we go, I'd repeat the invitation that we issued last year and I issued it there. Please pick up the phone and come down and talk to us. Have a look around and see it.
Yeah, thank you.
See it in action.
This meeting is now suspended.
Thank you.